Hello, welcome everybody to ADHD Post-Diagnostic Psychoed webinar number 4. We're going to be exploring some masking, RSD and other exciting topics. I'm Nikki. I'm going to be chatting you through this session with my lovely colleague Gemma.
Hi everyone.
Okay, so today in session 4, we're going to be exploring masking and rejection sensitivity in ADHD. We're also going to look at some helpful strategies to support you with this, things that you might want to try out. We're going to have a little bit of a dive into social relationships and again some strategies to help us scaffold how we interact with people, but from a point of understanding. And we're also going to round off at the end with a little reminder of the strengths of ADHD and how that expresses in our ADHD identity. So beginning with masking, it's really helpful to explore that everybody masks. We need to remember that everybody masks at some point. We speak differently to our parents, partner, children, colleagues. In different ways, we're sort of performing. In ADHD, that can have a substantial cost because we do it for a different reason. And masking is very much based in hiding or containing natural behaviors, fidgeting, bouncing around a little bit, being a bit effervescent, in order to behave in a socially acceptable way and to fit in, to help us connect with other people. So it's really about containing, and that's a substantial amount of work. Next slide, please. So this slide is really helpful in getting us to have a little think about what ADHD masking might look like. And it will be different for each of us, as will the impact. As it says, it could be trying not to tap your pen, chew, chew your cuff, fidget with something, bounce your legs about. These are regulating behaviours that are soothing for us. And when we're not doing them, it has a bit of an impact. It can be trying to force that concentration that we're struggling with. If you think about the Brown's model of executive functioning we looked at in earlier sessions, focus, trying to be focused when we're really struggling is a huge amount of work. It can be second guessing how we're interacting with people. You know, am I pausing at the right time? Is my speech too fast? Do I look like I'm paying attention? Lots of monitoring of how we're interacting and responding to people around us. For some of us, it can look like perfectionism. We try to be the perfect individual, respond in the perfect way, achieve our tasks to the very, very best of our ability, creating unrealistic standards that we wouldn't hold other people to. We can spend a lot of time apologizing. Bit of a default mode for a lot of ADHDers, and it's fed by this negative inner voice that we can experience. And we sort of can open up a conversation with, sorry, but. So we spend a lot of time in a way belittling ourselves. Or it can be trying to be as anonymous as possible, staying super quiet, not contributing, being very, very cautious, needing that reassurance that we've done the right thing because we are so concerned about making mistakes. And a lot of this is based in the belief that I think it's by the age of 12, a typical ADHD will have experienced over 20,000 more criticisms than a neurotypical young person, child. And that influences us and can lead us to masking to try and avoid those criticisms that we're expecting. Is there anything you'd like to add into that, Gemma?
I think the only thing I'd add here, Nikki, is just how ingrained and habitual some of this masking can become. So, for example, when I was diagnosed, I was very aware of how much I tried to hide fidgeting. And, you know, in long meetings, for example, I'd sit with my fingers interlocked to try and stop myself from fidgeting and to kind of try and stop myself from interrupting. I'd squeeze my legs crossed really tightly to stop my leg jiggling and bouncing. And I was aware of that as a mask that I was deliberately doing. But it was only when we were doing research for these psychoeducation sessions did I realize how much I over apologize. Like you said, that sorry, but, and also apologizing for really basic things like, oh, sorry, do you mind if I ask a question? Or sorry, do you mind if I go to the toilet quickly? And actually, it's that's one is so ingrained and so habitual. I hadn't even registered that it was something that I did almost as a preempt to kind of prevent any criticism or anything like that. And it's been a tricky one to work with because it's just so habitual.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. We do notice when you take a little step back, and we're going to do that in a moment, we're going to reflect a little bit. But when you take a step back, it's when you begin to notice the things that perhaps you're containing and how tired you are when you've been doing that all day long. Brilliant. Thank you so, so much, Gemma. Next slide, please. So there we go, personal reflections. Take a little bit of time, take a moment. Do you mask? Are there particular spaces that you feel a strong need to contain who you are, to suppress that natural way of being? Are there particular people that you feel you need to perform much more with? And we always assume it's colleagues or work settings, but sometimes it's family or friends, particularly if you're out in a group trying to sort of fit into a dynamic. So just take a few moments to pause and reflect on what that might mean for you. Next slide, please, Gemma. So this is a really helpful way of exploring the impact. And as I said earlier, everybody masks to a degree. My mother used to answer the phone and she would acquire whatever accent she was speaking to at the same, she could be Welsh, she could be Scottish. That was effectively masking, but it didn't have a cost for her. When we're exploring masking, that sort of leads to conversations about unmasking. When can I be myself? When is it good? When is it safe? And part of this is exploring the cost and the benefits, pros and cons of masking. So as you can see on the slide, it sort of tips one way. When we're constantly pretending to be something we're not, when we're containing, stifling who we are, it chips away at our identity. One of the things we tend to hear in our groups is, I don't know who I am when I'm not masking. What am I supposed to be like? What is it supposed to look like if I take that mask off? If you're late diagnosed, you've probably been masking for quite a while, and it can be really hard to know because it's habitual. As Gemma said, we're containing, so we're not quite sure. There's a significant emotional toll in masking. It's really, really hard work. It's full of self-doubt. It's full of evaluation. And that has quite a significant impact on our well-being. There's also a loss of authenticity because we get lost in going back to that sort of, it sort of mixes in with identity. Who are we? Who should we be? How should we behave? What is the right thing to do? What is the wrong thing to do? And of course, all the judgment that we see around us feeds into this. Social media is really difficult because there are other aspects to unmasking or masking other benefits. One of the biggest risks is probably burnout. If we think about the impact on our sensory, emotional, physical well-being by containing and camouflaging who we really are, that's using up significant amounts of energy. And when we keep burning our battery, running out of spoons, our battery keeps running flat, we're using energy from the next day. When we keep doing that, we increase significantly our risk of burnout when things become utterly overwhelming. And burnout is a consequence of working too hard for too long. But there are benefits: connection, social acceptance, being able to fit in. So there are spaces where it will be really, really helpful. So for example, if I'm at a corporate event, I'll try really, really hard not to interrupt. If I'm with my lovely colleagues who are very forgiving and very supportive, I might interrupt a little bit more. If I'm at home, I just interrupt everybody because that's who I am. It's excitement. There are benefits of social acceptance in a particular moment of that little bit of containment. Possibly reduce discrimination. in an ideal world, we should be able to be who we are completely authentically without any concerns at all. But the reality is, there are always going to be some people that are not supportive or accepting, and that can expose us to discrimination. So masking might, and it is only a might, protect us from that a little. And emotional containment, I'm never quite sure on this one, Gemma. The emotional containment is sort of not exploding. It's not having a volcano moment when we're overwhelmed or completely shutting down. But when we're suppressing emotions, all we're doing really perhaps storing it up for later, because those emotions are ever present, whether we're unleashing them or containing them and masking them, it's still going to be dealt with at some point. So that's sort of could slide across to the cost side eventually. So all of these things are worthy of consideration, but ultimately it's exploring that impact, that detrimental impact. If you come out of an environment and you are absolutely too exhausted to speak, too tired to do anything that's of quality, of fun, then it's that question, is this right for me? Do I need to have a space to just go and have a good bounce, to fidget, to have some movement, to be who I am? Anything you'd like to add to that, Gemma?
Yeah, I was just thinking about a client popped into my mind as you were talking about where that sliding scale goes on that emotional side. And they shared that, from a young age, they got the direct and indirect message that they were too loud, too much, too intense. Their emotions were too big and unmanageable for them and everybody around them. And so they learned at a really early age to suppress that, to push their emotions down. And absolutely, for some people, it might bubble up elsewhere at a later stage. And what this person described was that actually that years of pushing that emotional containment down, well, there was a benefit. They didn't get, feel embarrassed when they maybe lost control of their emotions in a serious or professional setting. And it sometimes meant that there was a bit of a superpower to be able to adapt to a situation, to be able to mask and conform to what that expectation was. But where that sliding scale came in for this person was that they didn't know what they were feeling. They'd pushed those emotions down from such a young age. It was just one big emotional ball. And they found it really hard to tell, well, what emotion am I experiencing? What's coming up for me? And that sometimes made it harder for them to know, well, what matters to me? What's important to me? What are these emotions trying to say? And am I being genuine and authentic in how I experience myself and how I express myself to the world around me?
That's really helpful because it is balance, isn't it? Everything is balance, cause and effect. So thank you so much for sharing that, Gemma. Really, really appreciate it. Next slide, please. So as we've sort of touched on already, there's the concept of unmasking, which goes hand in hand with discussions about masking. The most important thing to take away from this is that it's a personal choice. Nobody has the right to tell you to unmask. You have to feel safe, you have to feel secure. It's about having a really good understanding of who you are and what it means for you to be a neurodivergent individual, for you to be ADHD. It's wrapped in considerations of the benefits of masking versus those costs. Are you in a good space to do this? Have you got good emotional regulation? Have you got some fantastic strategies in your toolbox to help you through that process? Because unmasking can be quite scary. We never know quite how people are going to respond. We don't know actually quite how we're going to respond to sort of unleashing our ADHD on the world. Because I know I can get quite big sometimes when I'm having a moment. It's being ready for that and having people around us to support us when we make that decision. I guess sorry, we might be thinking about, are we looking at unmasking in a situation that has the most cost to us, is the most detrimental? And that sounds like a great idea, but it could be helpful to explore unmasking in a safe space first, in somewhere that's going to have the least consequence, with people that you feel comfortable with, that you feel are likely to support you. So there's a lot of factors that come into unmasking, and bound in that can be that insecurity about what's it going to look like? who am I really? But this is part of that voyage of discovery, and it's something you have to do in a way that you feel comfortable doing, and that feels the most secure. Because I can be uncertain enough as an ADHDer. So when we make these decisions, we need to do it comfortably and we need to feel as secure as we can in that moment. But definitely never feel pushed into it. But also don't be inhibited by other people's expectations, because this is your journey. It isn't anyone else's. It's very much about what's right for you in that moment. Next slide, please, Gemma.
So, if we go on to exploring rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD, it can be thought of as really interlinked with masking. I don't know what you think about that, Nikki, how much RSD and masking can maybe go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's trying to avoid rejection, isn't it? The whole purpose of masking is to blend, is to camouflage and fit in and not be rejected.
Thank you. So, some people may have heard of the term rejection sensitivity dysphoria before and can relate to it or not. Others, this might be a completely new term. When I was diagnosed with ADHD about 8 years ago now, I didn't come across the term RSD until about another year, 18 months later. And for me, finding out about RSD was like being diagnosed all over again. ADHD helped explain a lot, but what was missing in the diagnostic criteria and my understanding of ADHD at the time was, where did my intense emotions fit into all of this? My feeling really big emotions, like the pleasant, excitable emotions that Nikki was talking about, but can be great, but can sometimes derail us or not always be received the same way or the way that we would like to by other people. And those low emotions can just feel really intense. And exactly like it says on the slide, RSD it's a really intense emotional response. Last session, we looked at those emotional regulation systems, and RSD puts us in that threat zone. And it's that intense feeling of threat, of rejection, of hurt, disappointment, in response to both actual and perceived criticism, rejection, or failure. Now, we can't control what other people do or say and whether we're actually criticized or rejected. But what we can work on is that perception. Like Nikki was talking about earlier, we know that some research has indicated the amount of, direct and indirect criticism that young ADHD kiddos experience. It doesn't stop there. And so we might be on the lookout for it. We might start to compound that sensitivity to rejection and criticism with being on the lookout for it, being primed for it. I like to think about it a bit like, well, what happens when you look for trouble is you find it. So we might inadvertently be noticing subtle signs of criticism or rejection or over-interpreting those signs. Either way, the emotional response is still real, is still as intense, and it's still valid. It often looks disproportionate to the situation. For some ADHDers themselves, they can even feel a little bit shocked by the intensity of their response to an RSD trigger. So please do keep in mind that whether that response is based on an actual criticism, a perception, regardless of how proportionate or disproportionate it may seem or feel, your emotions are valid. How you feel in that situation is valid, even if your perception might be inaccurate. We know that RSD is a really common experience amongst ADHDers. Now, the term RSD is not a diagnostic term in itself, but rejection sensitivity can be experienced across a range of mental health and neurodivergent conditions. We know it's common in social anxiety, in some personality disorders and bipolar conditions, and it's being researched more and more in the autistic communities. So let's have a look at some of the traits of RSD. We know that it can really fuel low self-esteem, self-criticism, and contribute to that social anxiety. As Nikki was saying earlier, when we were thinking about that overlap of masking and RSD, a lot of that mask might be about keeping up that performance, fitting into those social expectations, those social norms. It's keep that rejection or potential rejection at bay. We might find that people experience that they are easily overwhelmed with feelings of shame or embarrassment, that they even may struggle to process for themselves. We might find that people become avoidant or withdraw from social situations or any situation that might trigger RSD. While that might be helpful in the short term, it can sometimes backfire because then all we've got is our own internal thought processes and experiences about what could happen in that situation. And we maybe don't get that adaptive experience to find out, well, if we had gone to that party, or if we did take on that request to do a presentation, maybe it wouldn't have gone as bad as we thought. As I was saying about that looking for trouble, we may misinterpret things. We might misinterpret feedback. We might only notice the criticisms and not remember or pay as much attention to that praise. Or we might misinterpret other people. Maybe we interpret somebody's confused frown as that they're annoyed or angry with us or they don't like what we said. And if we take that latter interpretation, we could quite easily slip into that ruminative cycle where we dwell on RSD events, we play them back over in our mind. Imagine what would it have been like if we'd said this or done that. And so we know that that can sometimes add to that RSD and magnify that emotional feeling because our brain can't tell the difference between what's real and imagined. The more we criticize ourselves, the more we dwell or play over these RSD triggers, the more painful they become. And RSD can be internalized or externalized. And we may fall anywhere on that continuum depending on different situations and different types of triggers. When it's internalized RSD, this is when that attack is turned inwards, really hard on ourselves, beating ourselves up, really critical, demanding of ourselves. Or we slip into catastrophizing, imagining that the worst is going to happen. When it's externalized, we might become angry, defensive, maybe even lash out or become overly judgmental, critical of others, hold others to the same high standards that we hold ourselves. Forgot to mention as well, when it's internalized, this is also where we might find those feelings of wanting to disregard ourselves, dismiss our self-care, our needs, or engage in behaviors that we know deep down aren't good for us. We know that RSD can really drive perfectionism, can fuel that imposter syndrome, add layers of masks on. We might set those unrealistic standards. So we'll look at some strategies in a bit around how we can work with some of this RSD. But just before we do that, is there anything that you'd like to add there, Nikki?
I think an example that popped into my mind when you were explaining about how we ruminate on things, and a classic thing that pops up is a performance review. You get 8 positive comments and 1 recommendation. And it is a recommendation. 2 o'clock in the morning, you've lost your job, you've lost your house, and we just go on this flight of absolute catastrophe because we can't remember the positives. And RSD is such a difficult thing. It's not choice. We get drawn to this innate sense of failure, of being flawed, and it's really helpful to understand the power that has over us. That recognition, hopefully some strategies will help to alleviate that, but it's being aware that we miss so many positives because we're sort of wrapped in this negativity.
Thank you for sharing that, Nikki. And you're so right there about what you said about how it links to other memories as well, and how we get that stuckness. And when we're in that threat mode, we're in that RSD trigger, it can be really hard to broaden that lens and see things differently. So if we look at some strategies to think about RSD, now please remember as well that RSD is very connected to our emotional regulation, and it can feel really intense, and the impulsive responses that a lot of us ADHDers are prone to can make it hard to put these strategies in place. So please be kind to yourself, and hopefully you find some things helpful. We may need different strategies at different stages, depending on what we notice, what we're aware of at the time, and what's possible to put in place. Because of the differences in emotional awareness and regulation, it can be harder for ADHDers to notice the buildup of emotions under the surface until they can't be ignored. A bit like that scale slide that Nikki was talking about earlier. Yeah, even if we keep those emotions in check, yeah, or we're just not aware of them, we're not noticing how our body feels. But then one thing happens that tips the scale, and that's why our response looks so disproportionate. But actually, it's a buildup, and that was the last straw. And what we're seeing and experiencing is a culmination of all of those stresses piling up. So developing our interoceptive awareness, noticing what's happening inside of our body, developing that emotional literacy, being able to recognize and name our emotions, can be a really important place to start. So what we have on this slide is 3 stages to think about in terms of the buildup of RSD: disturbance, activation, and high alert. I'm going to refer to the hand model of the brain again to talk this through. So in session 3 last week, you would have covered the hand model of the brain as a way to understand that buildup of emotions and how we might flip our lids when we're highly distressed and dysregulated. Now, again, just to recap, all humans can flip their lids. Yeah, when that fight or flight response is really activated and we're feeling really dysregulated and overwhelmed. We are not our most rational selves because of that loss of blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. We might not always go straight to flipping our lids. We might teeter or be kind of on the edge. And so that's how I kind of think about these stages. If that's us solidly, engaged, rational thinking brain is online and we're in the flow, we're pretty cool and chill. Disturbance would be like this, activation, and then high alert. And we might need different strategies at different stages because of the prefrontal cortex abilities and executive functioning skills that we need might not always be accessible. When we're in that disturbance stage, that prefrontal cortex is still engaged. This is when we might be better able to accurately identify any self-critical or negative thinking. This is where our memory networks are also still engaged, where we might be better able to access contradictory or disconfirming memories and information. To be able to go, hang on a second, if I use that performance review example that Nikki gave, if we've only been a little bit disturbed, we might be able to go, hang on a second, there was a ton of positives in my performance review and one recommendation. And actually that recommendation is really good for my growth and my development. So it feels fair and that's okay. Maybe it's not nice to feel that there was a recommendation, but I can put it into perspective. I can also then go, actually, how many other times have I experienced praise, recognition, positives for how I've done? This is where we can maybe go, hang on a second, I'm not this terrible person that I think I am just because I made a mistake or I let someone down. I'm still a good person. Have I actually hurt anyone by saying no to that invitation, for example? Externalizing our RSD can be a useful strategy. So for example, I call mine the RSD gremlin. And when I can access some of these skills, when I recognize that I'm in disturbance, definitely doesn't happen all the time, I'm able to kind of go, hang on a second, that's my RSD gremlin. And that's not telling the truth. I can notice those emotions, but I don't have to listen to everything it's saying. So externalizing our self-critic or our RSD, giving it a name, just helps create a little distance between what's going through our mind and who we are. Because just because I think something doesn't mean it's true. We're in an activation stage. So this is when we're kind of teetering on that edge. Yeah, we're feeling dysregulated, feeling stressed, overwhelmed, hurt. This is where we maybe just need to actually notice what we're feeling. If we can access some of those thinking skills, great. But actually, maybe in this stage, we just need to notice, okay, I'm feeling hurt right now. I'm feeling threatened. I'm feeling criticized. What's going to help me self-soothe and calm down? This is where we might take a few deep breaths, use some of those grounding skills, or thinking about who is a safe person to go and talk this through with. Who is your RSD buddy? Yeah, the one that can help put it in perspective for you. Yes, if you're about to spiral, I'm going down that self-critical, I'm a terrible person, I'm not good enough spiral. Is there someone that you could reach out to that could help you talk it through? High alert, that's when we flipped our lid, folks. Yeah, and we are not our rational best versions of ourselves in that moment. And that's not our fault because our emotional survival-based brain is taken over in that moment. And its job is to keep you safe. Yeah, even if it thinks safety is beating you up with self-criticism, even if it thinks safety is attacking that source of threat. So this is where we want to leave that situation. If it's safe to do so, go for a walk. Yeah. Say, can we talk about this later? See if we can slow our body down so we can slow our mind down and allow that thinking brain to come back online. Another way of thinking about these 3 stages is with a rev image. What we've got on this slide is the 4 R's. It's a technique developed by Caroline Maguire to help identify and manage RSD. It can be challenging because it requires a lot of stopping and thinking, which is somewhat counterintuitive and really hard for our ADHD brains. But some people find a visual helpful to think about what level are you at. And so the green or teetering on to that yellow, that would be that disturbance. Yellow would be the activation and red would be high alert. And so just like that previous slide, the steps are very similar. Step 1 is recognize where you're at emotionally. What do I notice? What do I perceive? Sometimes it's also helpful to phrase it that way. What do I notice or what do I perceive also creates distance. When we ask ourselves, how do I feel? We can inadvertently own that emotion too much. I am angry, I am sad, I am hurt, and that might very well be the case. But when we notice sadness or perceive hurt, sometimes for some people, they find that that can help create, again, a bit of distance between the emotion and who they are. Then we might want to respond with a different strategy, depending on that situation. So I'm going to skip to the next slide and then come back to this one. Here's a way to think about those strategies. Knowing your triggers can help you plan ahead and think about what strategies might be useful at each stage. Sometimes I can feel that well of anger come up just reading an email, and I quickly hit reply and I'm tapping away on that keyboard. And actually in that green or disturbance stage, that's fine, write that email. But then maybe go for a walk and come back and decide if that's what you want to send, or if there's another way of phrasing it. In the yellow stage, think about what would be useful for you there. Again, think about those emotional regulation systems. If we're in that threat, how can we get into drive or soothe? Can we do some deep breathing, cuddle our pets, play with our kids, call a friend, or go into that distraction? Yeah? Is there something fun we could do for a little bit? Put on your favorite soundtrack and dance around your living room. Play a game. Something to shift the emotional tone. And in red, that's that high alert stage. Take a break. Yeah. Easier said than done. I know I struggle with this sometimes. I can go straight from calm and chill to red, and I'm there and I want to deal with that situation, that conflict, wanting to resolve it comes up. But actually, I need to recognize for myself that I'm not in my best self then, and coming back to it later is probably better. Now, I'll be honest, folks, I'm from South Africa and I went back home in November and I was going back to stay with my parents for a couple of weeks. And my mum is one of my biggest RSD triggers. She takes me straight back to when I was 16 years old. And so on the plane to South Africa, I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and do some of the stuff that we talk about in these webinars and these psychoeducation sessions. So I sat on the plane and I thought about, okay, so if this happens, like recognizing what my triggers are, what kind of things she might say, what situations, and how I might respond. It completely went out the window. Yeah, I got triggered. Yeah, and I went straight to high alert, started being snarky back with her, and all the stages and strategies that I thought about in green and yellow, like I said, went out the window. But I was able to catch myself. I became aware of the fact that actually, whoa, I'm now in high alert and I'm triggered. And I couldn't remember anything that helped before, but I just knew that this wasn't going to get any better right now. So I was able to go, okay, Mum, you know what? I just don't think we're going to get any further on this now. I'm just going to go to bed. Night. Love you lots. See you tomorrow. And I was able to kind of retreat from the situation. So I just wanted to share that as an example that, we can put all the strategies in place and intend to do them. Doesn't mean we always can. But please do be kind to yourself as you explore this stuff because it's not easy. So I'm just going to go back to the slide for a second. That reflect is going to be possible or more possible in that green stage. Yeah. So if you've gone from 0 to high alert, do your soothing strategies first. And then once you're back down in that green, how could you think about this differently? What actually happened? Sure, you weren't invited to your friend's party, but who else wasn't invited? Who was invited and what was the point of that party? Who was it for? What did your friend say? Is there another way that you can reframe and think about that situation? Okay, this wasn't about rejecting me. This was actually a really small, intimate family gathering, and actually none of the wider friendships circle was invited. You can put it into perspective when we're back in the green. Thoughts, Nikki? Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I was just thinking how much really all of these are about taking a pause, aren't they? They're just stopping, drawing breath, and in a way reflecting on what we've learned so much about ourselves as ADHDers and how those influences are creating these moments of overwhelm, of emotional, just rejection, feeling utterly flawed and almost unlovable, I suppose, in a way. But it's like having that ability to just stop in a moment, and even if it is when you've flipped the lid, so to speak, and you're in that red zone, it's still a win. It's still you stopping and thinking, actually, it's time to just draw a halt now, draw a line, move away, take a deep breath, and I can come at this again and it will feel better. And that's recognizing that ability is huge, and just pausing. And I guess the recognize is the pause at the outset, isn't it? This is what might happen. And I loved your example, Jem. Really, thank you so much for sharing that, because it's probably something we experience quite a lot, isn't it? It's that familial criticism and interaction. But even going into a situation and having a pause at the outset, knowing what might come up, what might be your triggers, is so powerful. Thank you so much for explaining that.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, so if we go with a little bit more around the thinking, what we've got on this slide is something called RSD thinking traps. Thinking traps, another word for this is cognitive biases, distortions, and essentially what they are is mental shortcuts. Our brains are always processing so much information. And as we grow as kids, our brain starts to learn how to interpret and process decisions and information and make decisions faster. Now, the reason I prefer the term thinking trap is because, well, that's what it does. We can all fall into thinking traps. And what they do is they trap us into unhelpful thoughts, unhelpful perspectives. And these are the perceptions that we can work with. So some really common RSD thinking traps. On mental filter, where we might only pay attention to certain types of evidence. The example of the performance review and dismissing those, several positive praise comments and honing in on that recommendation or constructive feedback. We hone in on that one and we filter out all of that other information. Or we pay attention to the one mistake we made in a presentation, the one piece of negative feedback, and dismiss the other stuff. Or we minimize. We downplay our achievements. We dismiss praise. They were only saying that to be nice. It wasn't that hard. Anyone could do that. So we then feed that self-criticism and that RSD even further by devaluing ourselves. Or we might jump to conclusions. Now, there's a few forms of that. We might think that we can read other people's minds, know what other people are thinking and what they think about us. We may often be paying more attention to how other people think about us than how other people think about how they're perceived. But we can't read minds. Or we might think that we have a crystal ball and we can see into the future. This is where that catastrophizing can come in as well. So catastrophizing is another form of a thinking trap or jumping to conclusions. And we might focus on the worst. What's the worst that could happen? What we really do is think about, okay, well, what's the best that could happen? What's the most likely thing that could happen? And maybe just broadening that out can help us think about things in a more balanced way. What's the best thing and what's the most likely if our default is to go to the worst? Emotional reasoning is a real biggie. Emotional reasoning is relying on our emotions as facts. Our emotions are hugely valuable. They tell us what matters to us, what's important, what our values are. But that doesn't mean they're great at telling us the truth about what's going on. So we may assume that because we feel a certain way, that's evidence of what is going on, and it must be true. So I feel embarrassed, therefore I must be an idiot. I feel like that wasn't good enough, so I'm not good enough. I feel like something bad's going to happen, so I must be in danger. I'm going to be criticized and rejected. Or we use a lot of demanding language. We hold ourselves to a lot of these shoulds and musts and have tos. Now, some people find that using a lot of shoulds and musts give them that little bit of pressure and urgency, that they need to get going with things. But the problem sometimes with too much demanding language is it makes it harder to know what to prioritize. We inadvertently put a lot of pressure on ourselves, even for things that we might actually want to do. Or if we use a lot of shoulds and musts on others, we might feel frustrated when they don't do the things that we think they should do. So I'd like you to just do a little experiment with us. I'd like you to think about something on your to-do list. And I'd like you to use some of that demanding language. Saying to yourself, okay, I must finish that assignment today. Oh, I have to go to the gym later. I should finish that project. So just let that one thing on your to-do list float around your mind using that demanding language. And just notice, how does that feel? What else comes up for you? How does it impact your motivation? Now, thinking about that very same thing on your to-do list, using some preferential language. This doesn't come naturally or easily to us. But things like, it would be great if I finished that report. I'd like to go to the gym later. I want to return that phone call. Or it would be great if I returned that phone call. So just thinking about that same thing on your to-do list and just allowing some preferential phrases to float around your mind. What are your thoughts on that, Nikki? What did you notice?
It makes a significant difference. I know for me, if I use should or must, my energy levels drop straight away and my body language changes, my tone drops. It's a really negative influence. But when you sort of give yourself permission to, it would be nice if I could, or I might be able to, it's a whole different flavor. It's just there's more optimism around it. Really powerful.
Thank you, Nikki. Now, each person's experiences are unique, and some people say that actually, the moment they switch to that preferential language, the urgency drops, and actually they don't feel as motivated to do that thing. So please do think about it for yourself, or think about it in terms of what are the priorities and what are the things that you actually might want to do that you've now put extra pressure on yourself to do. So just some final thoughts to think about when it comes to shifting that thinking. Just to recap, yeah, this is going to be tricky to do when we're in that high alert, lift our lid state. Okay. So please think about those soothing strategies. And then when you're in that green zone, that's when we can practice some of these skills. Perhaps you might find it helpful to journal or to keep track of what your triggers are. What was it that came up for you? What is the thought? What is the belief that's activating that? So for example, one of my big triggers is injustice and when things feel unfair. And I feel I have to fight so hard for fairness. But actually, it's not always helpful. Sometimes things are unjust. And I can maybe then look for some of that contradictory evidence of when times have been really fair and to try and find that balance. Or if you're thinking like, I'm unliked, no one wants to spend time with me. Where does that thought come from? Where does that belief come from? And is it still serving you? What would be more helpful? Where is the evidence that you are liked and people do want to spend time with you? What are the other reasons for why something happened? Get creative. Easier said than done. Challenge perfectionism. I really struggle with this. Yeah, there's a great quote, perfectionism is the enemy of done. Thinking about thinking about what good enough looks like for you. I find that really hard, I'll be honest. Yeah, I think I've held myself to such high standards for such a long time. It's either not at all or perfect, and I'm still trying to figure out what that good enough and that middle range looks like. But as Nikki was talking about earlier with that review, focusing on learning and growth. How can I grow from this? How can I develop? Easier said than done, but how can I see this challenge as an opportunity to stretch myself, to grow, to learn something new? How can we put that RSD gremlin in its place? Yeah, even when we made a mistake, even when we lost our temper and snapped at someone and felt bad about it afterwards. We're human. We're still figuring these things out. It's not our fault that we have a tricky ADHD brain, but it is our responsibility to learn to manage it and to be kinder to ourselves, because that's probably one of the most important things that I hope you will take from these webinars, is how to be a bit kinder to ourselves. That doesn't mean letting ourselves off the hook when we do something wrong, but it means not beating ourselves relentlessly for it. Using those mindfulness techniques, those grounding skills, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Next time you hug a loved one or a pet, could you hold on a little longer? Allow that oxytocin to be produced. Find what works for you. Meditation and mindfulness doesn't have to be sitting down and sitting still or picturing yourself on a beach or in a forest. For some people, mindfulness is imagining being on a Harley Davidson driving the Route 66 at lightning speed. Maybe it's doing something active. And then finally, for RSD, the last little one to think about is a little possible antidote. Recognition and responsive euphoria. Now, this doesn't have the same antidote effect for everyone, But some ADHDers find that praise, recognition, genuine praise and recognition, by the way, can be highly motivating and euphoric. What I mean by genuine praise is good job, everyone is too generic. It often doesn't have that same rewarding factor. And so it needs to be really specific and genuine. You know, you did a really great job at X, Y, and Z. Or I thought that was fantastic when you did da, da, da. Yeah, really specific and genuine praise. So for those of you that can relate to this, you might find it helpful to again, maybe journal or just spend some time thinking about it, writing it down. When do you experience RRE? What are the triggers? What does it do for your self-esteem, your mood, your motivation? What would it be like if you gave yourself some daily affirmations, some kind pep talks, or keep a record of any compliments, praise, achievements, a little log? As we were talking about earlier, when RSD is triggered, because it activates our threat system, we often access other emotional memories connected to those feelings and those experiences. So it's much harder to recall those achievements. Keep a record. Your successes, praise, positive feedback, compliments, things that you're proud of. Pull it out on your phone, on a notebook. Maybe that's one of the strategies that you use at one of those stages. Don't minimize that praise. Work on saying thank you and moving on. Take that compliment and celebrate your successes. Celebrate all the times you didn't snap and flip your lid instead of focusing on that few times that you did. And that's tricky for us to do as humans. We naturally notice positive events over negative. Yeah, if a plane suddenly fell from the sky, oh my gosh, we'd notice that, but we don't notice all the times that didn't happen. And that's the same with how we regulate and how we respond to others. We hone in on those times that we interrupted, we said the wrong thing. Yeah, what about all the times we did great? Anything you'd like to add to that, Nikki, or any final thoughts on RSD?
No, I think this is a really lovely strategy, and it's something, I recommend if I'm working with someone, having that little note. It's a lovely excuse to buy a nice bit of stationery too, but having a little book of me, where you list the things you've achieved. And they can be big things, they can be small things. It can be, having a little supper for some friends and not burning the carrots. It can be all sorts of things. But just having something you can go back to, because we do get that pull to negativity. And using our mind like a muscle, feeding into that neuroplasticity, the more we do this, the stronger that pathway becomes. And whilst the RSD might be there, we've got a choice, and we begin to create a stronger pathway to recognizing those positive moments.
Thank you, Nikki. You're so right about that. It is. It requires like a muscle. We don't just go to, if we're going to get big and strong, we don't just go to the gym once in a while. We've got to do it regularly. Right. Social relationships.
Okay, so we're going to have a little look now at ADHD and social relationships. We've got a fantastic slide coming up. It's really busy, so I'm going to give you time to have a good look. It's brilliant. Absolutely love this slide. A little bit visually intense. You may want to also pause. I'll leave a gap, but you may also want to pause the recording so that you can stop and have a really, really good read of this slide. But it's a helpful way of exploring the impact of ADHD on all sorts of social relationships that we experience. Next slide, please. Hey, so this, don't be put off. I love this. It's like a little visual journey into the ADHD mind. Such a great representation. So I'm going to just shush for a moment, give you a few seconds to have a little explore before I explain. Interestingly, silence can be a challenging thing for ADHDers as well. We like to be doing something all the time. So I'm going to start to explore this slide. We won't go through every single channel, but we're going to do a dive into a couple of them. So thinking about ADHD and the influence it can have on relationships. If you look at the main headings, we can see that executive functioning comes into play. Think about that Brown's model of executive functioning we looked at. Activation, focus, memory, all of those lovely six boxes from the Brown's model can feed into how we interact with individuals. So let's have a little look at that. Lateness. Doesn't always go down well when we turn up an hour late for date night. Or if you're due to meet a group of friends, maybe going away for a weekend and they're waiting for you, bags packed for you to arrive. And it's that frustration. We don't choose to do this. It's the planning. It's differences in our executive functioning. It's differences in how we access that ability in our prefrontal cortex means we don't always plan things, and difficulties estimating time. I've got loads of time. I can pack it. It'll take me 2 minutes. And then we realize we don't know where we left our passport. And we have no idea. Did we do all the washing of the smalls that we should have washed? Stop on M&S in the way. It's this sort of whole thing that comes together. Forgetting to pay bills, forgetting to go to appointments, confessional, forgetting to pick the children up from school. That's why it's really good to have a partner that texts you and reminds you to do these things. Bigger influences that can impact our relationships can be things like the changing of jobs. It's not uncommon for ADHDers to change jobs fairly frequently, sometimes out of boredom, and sometimes because RSD kicks in. We think we've made a mistake. We think it's insurmountable, so we leave. And that constant changing can have a significant influence on anxiety levels within a household. One of my faves is remembering that I'm supposed to reply to somebody around 2 o'clock in the morning. We're in for a nice spot of rumination when we can't sleep, super busy heads, all the distractions have switched off during, it's nighttime, isn't it? So the freeway of thoughts kicks in and, oh yeah, I was supposed to reply about going out on Saturday. But you can't at 2 o'clock in the morning. So of course we have working memories, a neurotypical person's working memories like an A4 sheet of paper. Ours is a post-it note. Get to time to get up in the morning and that recollection of having to confirm an arrangement has fallen off the post-it note. So you never reply. Differences in focus, maintaining attention, filtering distractions. When we're spending time with someone, we might find them very important in our lives. But that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to pay attention to them. If some random thought pops into our head, off we go. And they might realize that. We might introduce a rapid subject change in the middle of a conversation. And we might drift off and suddenly realize there's a response that they're waiting for because we've just gone off on a little moment. And a really important area that quite often gets overlooked in ADHD is we can sometimes have huge challenges with object permanence. So if someone is out of sight, they are literally out of mind. We might remember them 2 years down the line and think, I'm going to reach out to that person. And then we're surprised that they're surprised to hear from us. But at that moment, they've become very important again. They've become very present in our thought processes. So you can see from executive functioning alone, those areas of challenge that we can have influence how people perceive us and how we interact with them. It's our neurobiology, it's our neurology, our neurochemistry. It all comes into play. It's not a case of, oh, you're just not interesting. It's the way our ADHD minds approach things and generates extra challenges for us in maintaining relationships. If we explore Intimate relationships, sensory needs. Let's go for a tricky one. It's helpful to explore this because it can be a little bit uncomfortable to raise with people around us. But ADHD can have a significant impact here. When we have run out of decision-making ability and we don't want to choose dinner, we don't want to cook, we've run out of effort, we're exhausted, we don't have any energy left to do our share of the household chores, that can make a partner feel taken for granted. It can make them feel like they're carrying the load. If they don't have a similar experience to us, it can be quite hard to understand that actually, deciding whether to have chicken or pasta can be utterly overwhelming after a day of interactions and trying to contain our ADHD effervescence. We have sensory differences. And whilst this isn't part of the diagnostic criteria, remembering back to that iceberg, the sensory differences that we might experience. So that could be that we could be sensory seeking. We might like to loll upon someone, constantly touching. I need a hug. I need this. And that might be too much for a partner. Conversely, it can go the other way. We can be utterly overwhelmed by touch, especially if we don't know it's coming. So if you're washing up and your partner comes in to give you a hug, oh, if we're not expecting it, that can be absolutely straight into threat system, absolutely overwhelming for us and have a very negative response. And it's not that we're rejecting the person, we're rejecting that sensory channel. It's too much for us in that moment. And we have to be honest, we can get bored. We can once things become patterned and settled and routine, comfortable, that might be too much. That might be a little bit too much for us. We can then look to create some drama. And again, these aren't choices that we make, but we can get drawn to a need for drama. So we can inadvertently instigate it. Rejection sensitivity can be huge in relationships. That doubt, I'm not really good enough for them. They don't really love me. They're staying with me because they feel sorry for me. And we can create some incredible scenarios in our heads. And it's perhaps exploring how we can question those, how we can share those insecurities that are very much a product of all those little micro criticisms that we've gathered over the years. And then the distractibility. Sometimes we get distracted at the most inopportune moment. Off we go, flood of fancy, and that's really difficult for somebody when you're present but not present in an important moment. A nice hug, and there we are thinking, did I buy bread? I don't know. Can I fit in the gym? I don't know. And of course, they could be sharing a really important conversation or a really important moment. So we can see just from those two areas alone, ADHD can have a significant impact on how we relate to people and on their well-being and how they feel towards us. Anything you'd like to sort of add in to that, Gemma? Oh, you're on mute.
Just the double empathy problem. Just to mention, I guess, that it comes from the autistic communities in particular, but it's very relatable to ADHD. And it's about recognizing that communication is and always has been a two-way street. But the burden of maintaining reciprocal communication has often been put on neurodivergent people to conform to neurotypical standards and to figure out what those standards even are, because there isn't a book that we get handed out at school or a lesson or a module on how to interact and be with other people. And one thing that we know is really common with ADHD is a tendency to relate and express empathy maybe a bit differently. So, for example, if somebody shares an upsetting experience or event, we might share a related anecdote, another experience that is connected, at least in our minds, That is an attempt to connect, to empathize, to go, I too I can understand how you're feeling because I too have experienced something similar and this is what it was like for me. That can be misperceived as lacking reciprocity. But sometimes when you've got two ADHDers together, they really get that. And they go, oh my gosh, yes, you get it. Thank you for explaining that. We're not making it about us, we're trying to connect. And so explaining that to other people can be helpful. Or we might see that double empathy show up in nonverbal communication. We might misinterpret other people. So, the example I gave earlier of maybe misinterpreting somebody's frown and thinking that they're annoyed or upset with us, or maybe they were just confused, yeah, or tired. Or we might be misinterpreted. I know, for example, I've been misinterpreted at times. I can be very excitable, very loud and passionate when something's important to me. And I know that I've been misinterpreted as rude, as aggressive, when actually it's just sheer enthusiasm, um, and driven maybe by what we see as important in that situation. So yeah, just wanted to add that, Nikki.
Thank you, Gemma. And actually, it's interesting what you've just explained feeds into the rejection sensitivity, doesn't it? Because we misinterpret the frown and the person's cross with us. So we begin to feel rejected, or we can begin to withdraw, or perhaps we can begin to get a little bit antsy and we externalize that discomfort. So all of these things really begin to feed in and they can have a really destructive impact on a relationship. Impulsivity is a classic one, really, isn't it? It's that sort of feeds into our emotional sensitivity and dysregulation, um, frustration with ourselves. Oh, I've done it again. I've gone shopping on the internet 5 times tonight, and I'm supposed to be on a ban for the week. And then we take that exasperation into how we react to somebody, but we also can exasperate the people around us. You know, you promised you weren't going to spend this week. All of these little things that we can do, impulsive comments. You know, we might be really excitable, and it's wonderful and it's appreciated, but sometimes that thinking after and it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Oh, maybe that wasn't the moment. It can be challenging for us as much as it is the people around us. But I think if we can bring that lens in, and maybe a really good example is, you know, you're working from home, you're absolutely hyper focused. And your partner says, "Do you want anything from the shop?" No, I don't. You know, because we snapped. Because actually, it's oh, I can't think about that now. I don't have the bandwidth, and now it's going to take me 40 minutes to refocus my thoughts. We don't mean to snap. We really don't mean to snap. It's the influence of our ADHD in that particular moment. So it's really helpful to explore how ADHD can impact our relationships, whether they're intimate partners or whether they're friends, family. It definitely has a little flavour that sneaks out. Um, Next slide, please, Gemma. So it's really important. We've explored how ADHD can affect our social relationships, but what we really need is some strategies. Everything about this psychoeducation is about building a toolkit. So what can we try? And these aren't the only things you can try. These are examples. You might want to tweak them. You want to add some new ones in as you get to know your ADHD. Looking at executive functioning, that first area we explored on the previous slide, if you have people you feel safe with, talk about, maybe share that disclosure. This is what it looks like for me. I think about you. You're really important to me. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, if you're happy for me to text, I'm happy to do it. But I figured you probably wouldn't be. Sharing, letting people know that they're in our thoughts, just not necessarily at the best time. We can use routines. We can have strategies. I've tried things, for example, like a birthday calendar in the inside of a kitchen cupboard, but I only look at it twice a year. So unless you fall on those 2 occasions, never going to happen. So I know that one doesn't work. Haven't remembered to take the poster down, but that's okay. That's another thing. But we can use routines. We can say Mondays I speak to family, Tuesdays I speak to this particular friend. I have Wednesdays off, and Thursdays I'm going to speak to this group because we always do something at the weekend. So we can put routines in. But you can also explore things like buddying. You know, think about we looked at buddying under motivation. Buddying can be done in other ways as well. So again, these are just personal examples, but I have reminders on my phone that ping up now. I use my phone, it sends an alarm, it shouts a week before someone's birthday. That's too far away. And I have one the day before, and that's too close and nothing happens. But my friends are primed, and everybody in my little group pings me to say, you need to go shopping. And then I will go because I've sort of been nudged. Buddying up. Buddying isn't just for making us productive, it's also about helping us maintain these really important relationships as well. If you've got friends that are really good at organizing events, you can be really good at turning up. You know, it depends what the skill is, but we all bring something into a relationship, and it can be helpful to have those conversations, say, actually, this is what I'm good at. In fact, you might be, because of your creativity and love of novelty, you might be the person that's particularly good at saying, I've just found the most amazing festival. You buy the tickets because I found it. You know, we can skill swap. They might organize the travel arrangements. Looking at communication and social interaction, you know, again, if you're comfortable and you feel safe, talk about your style, talk about how you like to, or how you're comfortable communicating with people. You might not like using the phone, for example. A lot of neurodivergent people don't feel comfortable chatting on the phone, and a lot of people prefer sort of platforms like texts or other media platforms. Practice active listening. Oh, that's not one of our greatest strengths necessarily. We want to be really good listeners, but we drift. You know, we're sort of short term, aren't we? So maybe practicing. You can make it a game. We do lots of games in our family, things like we're going to a family event. Everyone has to collect 3 facts about a different family member, and then we chat about it on the way home. We make it very active but fun. If you're an oversharer, again, a little bit of an ADHD trait, it's no good people saying don't overshare. What does that mean? If we knew what it was, we wouldn't be doing it, would we? So maybe exploring with people again that you're comfortable and you feel safe with. What might that look like? How will they tell you? Is it going to be a little tap on the knee or a little ah? But you might need a cue to sort of say, okay, stop now. But explore that together. Because when we overshare, we're connecting, and we're really going for a moment of connection. And explore the impact of that on other people, because we're not going to necessarily see it. And the good thing with partners and with really close friends is that you can have these trusted conversations from a point of safety and respect. With our emotional, behavioral, impulsive behaviors, we can't change who we are. We're ADHD, so we're always going to have moments when we are having big emotions. We're going to have moments when we just have to do something, that impulsivity kicks in, and that's okay. It's okay to say, oh, that was a really ADHD moment. But you don't have to apologize. It's not about shame. It's not about blame. It's recognition, understanding why we've done something. We can't and we shouldn't apologize for being ADHD. If you offend someone, that's a different ball game. But we can't apologize for who we are. What we can do is understand it and explore ways that we can make life a little bit more comfortable to reduce some of the detrimental fallout from those moments. Again, code words with a safe person. That relies on a little bit of working memory. So don't make it complicated. Keep it nice and simple. And maybe explore areas that are likely to tip you into dysregulation. Get to know those triggers. Again, safety is a big word here, but if you feel secure and safe with a particular person, maybe give them permission to talk to you about what they've noticed, because they might spot a trigger when we don't. So it's really helpful to have people to come in and do that with us, and maybe co-develop some strategies, work together to see how we can make life more comfortable for us. Build up your toolkit and it will change. We most strategies have a shelf life when we're ADHD, but we usually circle back at some point. But building up a toolkit of ways to regulate and put those inhibitors that we're missing from our prefrontal cortex, develop some ways of just reducing slightly or knowing when to take a deep breath. And for relationship and sensory needs, again, it's very much about finding a moment where you feel secure enough to have that conversation. And when we're working with children and young people, we talk about doing this when you feel secure, not in the heat of the moment. That's always a difficult time to have a conversation, but maybe going for a walk side by side in the car, have that discussion, reduce the demands on you in the moment, and that might create some open forums. Ask people to reduce verbal information. You know, it's the last thing we need in a point of overwhelm is 10 tons of waffle. It really doesn't go in, and it's hard for us to work out what the important bits are. So maybe if we're feeling overwhelmed, ask people to just lighten up a little bit, reduce some of that language they're using. But also, looking at that boredom, that factor that can creep into relationships for us. Let someone know that, is you're going to struggle at this point, and we need to explore what we can do to make this a little bit different in that moment. Next slide, please. This is a really, really important slide because, again, when we tend to look and reflect on how ADHD influences our relationships, we do it from a very negative lens. But actually, as ADHD is going back all the way to week one, when we explored those wonderful strengths, you have unique strengths that you will bring to relationships. Creativity and spontaneity, random acts of kindness. We're great at those, aren't we? It's sort of like, it'll be really weird and wonderful. I was very tired yesterday, and all of a sudden a little chocolate bunny appeared around the door. I hadn't anticipated it. Random act of kindness from my neurospicy husband. We can hyper-focus on something that's important to our partner, on a friend. We can make them the center of our world, which for a little while can feel really wonderful for someone. It can make them feel super special. We can be quite adventurous. And that doesn't necessarily mean climbing up Kilimanjaro, though it could be. It could be, that little holiday we were going to have in Mallorca. Guess what we're doing instead? It brings an element of fun, of unpredictability, which can be an incredible asset in a relationship. When we're able to engage, I think ADHDs are probably the most enthusiastic people on the planet. And we do bring that commitment and that energy level when it's available. Well, we bring it to friendships, to partnerships. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be around. Because of the differences you've experienced, you are also going to bring a compassion and an empathy to your understanding of people. If you trip along in life, and this isn't every neurotypical individual, but predominantly neurotypical individuals don't understand what it's like to feel different, less challenged, isolated. We bring all these little random experiences in with a big dollop of compassion, and that can make us very sensitive to the needs of other people. We can be excited to meet new people. We can be excited to share our friendships, and we'll tend to welcome people in much more quickly. Oh, there's a new exciting person over there. Come into the fold. Great, great fun. We also do it with humour. It's a very powerful survival mechanism for ADHDers, and it can be really wonderful to be around, because although we can sometimes bring overwhelm and challenges into our relationships, we can also bring a good blast of fun, and that's again a very powerful facet in a relationship, in a friendship. Anything you'd like to add on the unique strengths we could bring in, Gemma?
I guess it would just be great if everyone watching could just have a think about what are their strengths? What unique strengths and abilities do you bring to your social relationships? What other people love about you? What compliments have you received? It doesn't come naturally to us to think about our strengths, but it can be really, really important to do that. And I'm curious, Nikki, which of these do you relate to?
I have to say sense of humour. I can laugh at most things in life, including
Yeah.
myself. I'm probably not adventurous, but I really do care about people. I really do care about people. It's really
Yeah.
important to me that people feel as good about themselves as they can. So I hope that's a strength that I bring into to all relationships, whether they're intimate friendships or with colleagues as well. How about you, Gemma?
No, I think we're both pretty good with spontaneous acts of kindness. And when I was diagnosed, one thing that always just stuck with me was my assessor said to me, "How about you're not always impulsive, but you're spontaneous?" And also with my impulsivity, I've definitely said the wrong thing and put my foot in my mouth and wished the ground would open up and swallow me whole because I said something without thinking and no filter. But I can also be a random complimenter and just randomly compliment, friends, family, strangers. And who doesn't like a random compliment?
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It makes such a difference. It's a bit like I guess I wonder if they're all ADHDers. That'd be a good research project. When it snows, people say hello. And it really lifts your mood. And I think ADHDers are more likely to say hi to someone at a bus stop or as we're walking along, perhaps than other people, because we do it without thinking. We're more spontaneous. So they're lovely, lovely little things that can make a significant difference to people's days. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Gemma. Next
Thank you.
slide, please. Oh, celebrating your ADHD identity. This is a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's such a woolly concept. What is our identity? Um, Celebrating our ADHD identity, I guess, is mostly recognizing our characteristics from a point of strength as assets. It's not to detract from those challenges that our differences can bring, but it is giving ourselves permission to put a positive lens on some of those ADHD aspects of who we are, working with our strengths. Um, Making people smile if that's your thing, if it's humor, that random act of kindness, that sort of spontaneity, valuing and validating yourself. And that's hard. That's really hard to do, to move away from that critical inner voice, but actually knowing that, yeah, there are some challenges there, but you're a pretty cool person. You know, a late diagnosis means that you've survived lots of challenges without supports and scaffolds. So you've got some really amazing innate skills linked to who you are. Get that notebook. Give yourself permission to go buy it or put a note page in your phone and write down your accomplishments. Call it the list of wow, whatever you want to call it, but make a note of all those wonderful moments. If you've done something or said something and you've made someone smile, write it down. It doesn't have to be an email that says, that was an amazing job on that project, or thank you for delivering those wonderful flowers. It doesn't have to be that. It can be as simple as making someone smile. Nurturing self-kindness, talk to yourself, and hopefully this has come across all the way through. Talk to yourself, treat yourself like the most important person in your world. Use that narrative that you use with people you care for and spin it round. Reflect it back at you. You deserve that. You absolutely do. You're all amazing people. Even though there may be challenges there, there's still a wonderful human being. That's part of that. If you can find spaces where you feel safe to do this, be utterly, utterly ADHD you. If you need to bounce around on your tippy toes, then you do that. I'm on a course at the moment with a group of ADHDers, and it was lovely. I had my standing desk fully elevated, and I was bopping around for 90 minutes last night. It was lovely, absolutely lovely. Nice space to do it because everyone else was doing it too. And there's nothing quite like that ability to be who you are. Connect with people that make you comfortable. Sometimes we feel very driven to have the right friendships, the right connections at work, whatever. But connect with people that bring something to that relationship because you're bringing you, and you deserve to be in friendships, relationships with people that are positive for you, that are accepting of your ADHD. Increase awareness, that's very much up to you. You maybe increasing your own awareness and understanding of ADHD, where it fits in the wider neurodivergent community, being comfortable being a neurodivergent individual, and it might even tip over into a little bit of banner waving, and tipping into the world of the politics that surround neurodivergence. There's no rights or wrongs on this. It's just getting to know and embracing the community in a way that works for you, because that is part of your identity. Some people are really happy being very vocal, and some are very happy just getting to know their own flavor of ADHD, and they're equally valid. I don't think there's anything else I can add on to identity other than it's about being comfortable. It's about bringing quality to your life in a way that's important for you, not important for other people.
So, thank you all so much for joining today. We really hope you enjoyed the last of the ADHD post-diagnostic psychoeducation webinars. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, we would love to hear from you. Your views are hugely valuable as we continue to develop the service and make sure we are delivering what is most useful and meaningful for you. So please do contact ndassessments@problemshared.net, or you can give us a call on 020-3835-2900, or you can pop onto Trustpilot and leave us a review there.
Thank you all so, so much for your time, and I hope this has been helpful. Do take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.